findings as a pretty good kind of FAQ thing. And so the document itself kind of goes through what are the high-level kind of key takeaways. And as we discussed at the working session, kind of the big things that we want to drive home are impact was seen as the primary driver for teacher departure in DCPS schools. When we thought about and looked at work culture and workload, that was kind of a primary departure reason when we were looking at public charter schools. However, it was prevalent in both sectors. There was references to lack of support for teacher safety and mental health. I think that that's probably going to be something that we'll probably start to see more of now, thinking about COVID-19 and what is going to be happening post-COVID, and when teachers are ready to go back to school. And then other things that were cited there were tensions between kind of leadership. And I think one of the really most valuable things, and I know Fraser cites this in the teacher attrition video, is I think that 86% of those individuals who we surveyed were passionate about teaching, but just felt that they did not really receive adequate support from their school or LEA. And I think that really says something about individuals who want to be teachers, that they really want to, but that there really are things in the system that are preventing them from staying. And so those are kind of some of the key takeaways. Recommendation-wise goes, I think in our cover letter that is in the kind of cover memo for the report outlines 5 recommendations that I think the state board is presenting with respect to teacher attrition. I will note that these recommendations were in advance of the state resolution that was adopted at the last public meeting with respect to the recruitment and retention of Latino teachers. Other things to kind of note that I think are really interesting about the survey, representation-wise goes, I think there's some questions about, what types of schools were represented. We had about 60% DCPS schools, about another 40% were charter schools. There were, I think, about 26 different schools that were represented across 7 LEAs. Let's see. I know Ruth has had a really good chance to kind of dig into the report, and there's a lot of other things in there with respect to teacher certification and things like that. And Darren and I right now, we're actually working on trying to put together some data visualization through Tableau that will actually allow us to visualize this data in a more accessible way, as opposed to just kind of spitting off facts, but allowing those constituents and you all to kind of filter and kind of navigate the data in a more visualized form to really identify, if we wanted to look at teachers that were in the classroom for less than 5 years, but who had indicated they wanted to teach for 10 plus years, what were their primary drivers for leaving and things like that. So that's kind of some of the work that we're doing with the survey. But I'll stop there. I know Fraser said that we'll do questions at the end, but I do want everybody to know that if there are kind of any questions that ever come up with respect to the survey and its findings, you're welcome to direct those to me with respect to this report or any subsequent reports, and kind of confirming rates and things like that, just to make sure that any information that we're sharing out is accurate.
Thank you, Alex. That's great. And that's a really good overview about it, so that we have something to work with questions. Malayo?
Yep.
Hello.
Hi.
So I wanted to get into the survey video and the feedback we got from it. JP is sharing a quick Google document here together. So basically, we began outreach on April the 23rd, and it lasted about a week. I reached out to over 20 outlets, big and small. Some were, from our listservs from GovD, are regulars, and then some are my personal contacts in TV and radio. From these contacts, we were able to get a quote from the survey in the Washington Post, which Ruth helped us facilitate, and nothing else. The feedback I got when I circled back with them was that if it's not COVID-19 related, it would be very hard for them to be able to get past their editors and get any, sort of coverage on that. But they did note that they would keep it, on file in case, there was a break, whatever. From social, we did get pretty good coverage. We had over 700 views of the videos on Twitter, 500 views on Instagram and Facebook, and we got 36 new followers on Instagram from the video launch. That's all I have.
Oh, okay, great. So that basically the answer to that is that really the whole crisis that we're in with COVID-19 has put everything else on the back burner as far as those kinds of things, as far as coverage and things like that.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Emily, you want to talk about the recruitment of Latino teachers?
Sure. And I am connecting it to the teacher retention report, and it does sound like part of the issue is thinking about messaging that, authentically connects it to where we are right now. And I do think that pointing out that now more than ever, we need stability for our students, that these are not separate issues, I guess is what I'm getting at, right? And that teacher retention is more important now than it ever was. So I would just premise or frame it with that. I think that there are three primary findings that Alex highlighted in the teacher retention report that were, around impact and resources regarding discipline, and then climate and culture. And I think that in terms of the Latino teacher resolution, that there is overlap, but what my hope is that in presenting these, the report and the resolution, that we can talk about the resolution as sort of an extension or a way of drilling down into what specific needs are for, specific groups of teachers. So for instance, in terms of impact, something that, some of the feedback that I got from teachers, Latino teachers, was that especially teachers who are teaching in dual language programs, that more often than not, their principal and the person who comes to evaluate them doesn't speak Spanish and doesn't necessarily have any expertise in what dual language teaching should look like. And therefore, the evaluation is not objective or even useful, right? And so it's an issue of impact, but it's specific. And so I think that's something that I've learned through this process of putting the resolution together, and I think it's really important. So I guess, and then the issue of climate, something that came up was that, there were several teachers who started out in a charter school as the only, or it didn't matter, charter or DCPS school as the only Spanish teacher, but then were able to go to a dual language program and found that the culture was much more supportive. And so that is something that's a broader issue, but it's still a question of, I think it dovetails with other needs that have been expressed around expanding dual language programming, right? And creating that culture for teachers who are coming here and learning a whole new culture and not having colleagues around them. So And I guess my larger question is, I know we want to figure out how we're going to message and around and push out the teacher retention report, and I'm wondering how we are also going to do that with the Latino teacher resolution, and I'm wondering if we could do them together in some way, because I do think they're, naturally connected. And then sort of a third piece of this is just, I know that members had brought up the issue of, well, what about, diversifying the teacher pool in general? Like, we also need to focus on African American teachers. And so I'm wondering if this could be framed as sort of an effort to, one, create stability for students during this time of great need, and two, helping to sort of think about what specific groups of teachers need in terms of retention, recruitment and retention. And then third, like, how do we continue to diversify the teacher teaching and school leader pool? So that's sort of my spiel. And I guess I would be interested in having a conversation about that if we have time.
Good, that's great. And the virtual fair is today, the recruitment fair for people that want to become teachers. I don't know if Ruth, do you know anything about that? Anything more than what it is? You're on mute, Ruth.
That's odd to be on mute. I don't know anything that anybody else doesn't know.
Okay.
I just know it is.
But it is happening right now. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Emily. That was very helpful, I think, for when we can ask. I don't mean it negatively. I just mean it that we can we have things to talk about.
Can I add one more thing? Sorry, I did forget something, which is that I think there was fear expressed, during this process of putting the Latino teacher resolution together around engaging with advocates and experts in the field. And I understand it, but I also think it's a mistake not to engage with those folks. And I just want to say that leading up to, my taking this on, in part it was because there were advocates who were putting forward, really important information about the gap. That's what they do. And then, they are the ones who sort of are gathering the information that we need. And I want to say that the resolution now has created more attention on this issue, which I think is really important, and that we should take this and think about how to use it, this idea of engaging with advocates and experts, if we do want to, do this again for African American teachers, and think about who's already doing work in this field and very deliberately engage them. So that's all I want to say.
I think that's what we're going to talk about when we get to the where we are now for reactions and next steps. So the floor is open for questions if anybody has any questions. And I think that everything was covered really well. Does anybody have any questions about anything that has been said?
I have discussion, not questions.
Okay, but we're going to get to discussion in the fourth section of which now begins. All right. And I sort of broke it down into two parts. And the first part is August. And I'm just saying August as the beginning of school. I don't know if schools are going to start in August. I tend to think that that's not going to happen. But I'm just going to use August as an idea as the beginning of school. And I think that in my opinion, that's when our media blitz ought to happen, ought to bring back the information that we've given them to try to get people understand. We're going to need a lot of information in order to push it forward. But I just wanted to, I thought of August as that. And then after August, it's how do we use the information that we have about teacher retention. We should be able to get some information about what attrition happens between now and August. All right. And we can use that information, but we really, I think, for me, it's so important that we engage the LEAs to understand the importance of looking ahead and how do you retain teachers, not into attrition, but how do new teachers, and my definition of a new teacher is anybody that's been teaching for less than, for everyone that's been teaching from 1 to 5 years, right? What are the systems doing to retain those teachers? Because we know that the systems were not, well, I know DCPS wasn't doing anything to retain teachers, right? As far as professional development, as far as any kind of help from the leaders of the schools, there was less help from the leaders of the schools than there was help from the leaders of the school. So I'd like to just open it up for that. And y'all talk. All right, Ruth, you got it. Throw your hand up.
All right. So, well, I have a few things. Let me start with one and then we can circle back, which is getting this out there. Such a great report. And I know a lot went into the report and a lot went into trying to get it out. And then we got sort of COVIDed out. So how to deal with that. And I hear you, Fraser, on doing something around August. I think August, well, we could make an argument that August is all going to be about going back to school and distance learning and that la, 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 la. And that arguably the time to push this is now more than then. But I would also just sort of say, and Malayo had said this to me earlier in a different context, which is, I don't know that we can really game when anybody's going to be ready to do this, but to the points that everybody has made, it is so related to the COVID era in terms of the stability. And I think, I guess my push would be to sort of really think about pushing this out as much as we can now. I have a couple of thoughts on that. And just continuing, do another big push now, do another big push maybe in August, and think about some things in the middle, some op-eds and some other stuff and some other stuff. So we can come back to specifically what that might look like because I have some thoughts, but let me just throw that out to begin with.
Okay. Emily, you got anything?
Well, I guess I'm just wondering, Ruth, when you say push it out, what do you mean? Like sending it to our constituents in our wards, or do you have something in mind when you say that?
I mean, a few things. First of all, I think, and this has come up regarding lots of different things and issues, so it's not new to this, but how to push something out in a way that is systematic, that involves the wards, that involves all of us, and does something else. So here's just an example. If we were to do, and this is really meant as brainstorming, if we were to do this again, we have this great video, we have the great clips. I will confess, I did not see them come out the first time around. And so I didn't do anything with them. 11 things were going on. I didn't do anything with them. I saw them like a week later, and then I was sort of like, oh, shoot. I also know that by the time I saw them, I happened to be in a conversation with Scott Goldstein. And of course, as Emily said, they've been huge on this, but they were just switching to, they were putting out their COVID report. So they didn't want to sort of switch their gears onto this. So what I'm thinking, one piece of what I'm thinking is if we did a re-release, how to do it in a way where everybody on the board is sort of set up with a reminder. Today, this is going to be the day that the tweets all get added to us so that we have them. That's one thing. And then if you don't see people getting engaged, somebody should call us. There should be a staff point that's sort of seeing, did people not get it, and reach out to people. And then what other groups could we sort of schedule to engage with us, groups, individuals that might do it, so that we could get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses. So that's one piece. Another piece is to, and Malayo, again, might have something to say on this about whether it's viable, but to try to have a piece in DC Line, maybe that same day or right around that or a week later, so that there's sort of a, and I think we could get that, so that you've got that going on is a second piece. A third piece, not exactly related to the PR, and the staff may already be doing this, John Paul, is to make a list. Look, there's a huge number of people in the policy world. I mean, I think every LEA head, every school principal, every dean of the ed schools, and we can make, other people would have other lists. They should get a copy of this, with a cover note from probably Fraser, Marcus, and me, maybe I think is probably the right group, to just sort of say, look at this, this is what it has in it, and really try to get it out in the DC policy world, advocacy world, because eventually that will have an impact on it being seen and understood, and it'll put pressure on DCPS, I think.
So you kind of answered my question, another question I had, which is, what is our ultimate goal with this? And so it's putting pressure, maybe creating awareness so that there's pressure. I guess my other question is related to DCPS. They sent us their letter, which basically said we don't agree with this report or think it's valid, right? Do we need to, or should we address that in messaging, at least to, like if you're sending to policy folks? We don't I assume we don't want it to just be a like, the SBOE has this stance and DCPS has this stance. Is there a way of sort of acknowledging their or OSCE's report and the differences, the way they frame it, and sort of making sense of it?
I think my feeling is that's why I sort of changed the title from teacher attrition to teacher retention.
Yeah.
Is that by talking about retention, it's something that we're all in together. And by talking about attrition, you're pointing fingers.
Yeah, no, that's.
And I don't think we're going to gain anything. I mean, especially in this highly politicized world, by pointing fingers. I think we need, especially, we've got a report that works. We've got a really great video that speaks, especially with the students and who are talking about something real. I agree with Ruth about getting the video to more outlets and getting more people to see it. I think that's a great idea, but I think that we don't need to be talking gotcha with this at all. If we're going to try to change the world, I mean, my whole thing about how schools should be when they finally start is not to make it normal. We don't need to go back to normal. Normal didn't work. It needs to be something in the future. And so that what we should be working with is what does the SBOE recommend or to schools can do so that teachers don't leave. And I think that should be the main focus of whatever we do between now and the end of next school year. Because what I would like to have this report do is change the way things were done so that at the end of next school year, the numbers of teachers that leave aren't 25% or 20% or 15%. That's not positive anyway.
Right.
It's like Trump talking about, well, we're only going to lose 200,000 people. I mean, give me a break. We don't want any teachers to leave except for good reasons. And they didn't leave because of good reasons. So we want to change not give them reasons.
Yeah.
I'll get off my soapbox. But I'd like to mention a couple of things. We do need to find out as quickly as we can from the LEAs and it won't happen until July or August. How many teachers left at the end of this school year? And then we need to find out how we can, and I think if we could establish, or if it's possible to establish a relation with DCPS, that we're not out to get them. We just would like information so we can help them, right? Because our relationship with DCPS is not the most positive in the world. And I won't even begin to talk about OSSI. But we need to, we have to work with them. It's just like, some of us have elections going on in our ward. And we have to work with that council member. We have to work with the mayor. We have to work. I mean, we're citizens of the United States. We have one president. We got to do everything we can to try to get people to listen and to understand that our voice is important and that we want things to change for the better.
But I guess that's what I was getting at here with the messaging and with maybe in our whatever we're putting out to include acknowledgement that, for instance, DCPS, the attrition rate did go down, right? It did get a little better last year. And maybe, I don't know how to, why they're coming up with this different conclusion around impact, but maybe acknowledging it and then explaining, I don't know, just kind of framing it in a way that is more friendly to them, but sticking, obviously we're not going to change anything in our report, but not ignoring the fact that they also responded to it and that OSSI has their own report. I mean, I haven't dug into OSSI's report completely, but, it does seem like they're just reversing the statistics, right? Like, so they're pointing out the numbers that are staying and we're pointing out the numbers that are leaving. And as you said, even if it went from 25 to 22, that's still a problem. Like, whereas they're kind of saying, well, 80% stayed,
Right, but that's not what,
No, I know.
But you're right. We need to make sure that our language is not confrontational. I think that, the fact that we got the report done without help from a lot of the LEAs is important. So we need to build on that. Ruth, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Emily in this sense, or sort of just make it clear to everybody. The data that OSSI and DCPS put out in the fall, I think ultimately, as Emily says, was not really in conflict with what we were saying, except that DCPS focuses more on effectives. I agree with that. But there is a DCPS formal response at the back of our report that's a response to the report where they question our research methods. So
Right.
That I think is more serious. And my own view is, insofar as we get questioned on it, my understanding from Alex is absolutely that our research scientist who did this stands absolutely behind this, that this is a totally credible sample and we can go from there. And if DCPS wants to do a bigger sample that it feels more comfortable with, we welcome them to participate as we ask them to this year, working with us to create a full pool of departed teachers, and that's what we'll use. So two different things. Just wanted to clarify that.
No, that's good. It's good. Zach?
Yeah,
I see you woke up finally, so welcome.
no, I was trying to jump in, but also being letting people talk. But just a few reactions. I would agree with Fraser's feedback that it's probably better to frame things in a more assets-based or positive way than not. So I do prefer talking about teacher retention versus teacher attrition. I do think it's about like finding solutions versus just pointing out the problem. I think part of the issue with just releasing the report is that we're kind of naming the problem, but we aren't really getting towards the solution in a way that we could make this a campaign of sorts, is identifying schools that have high numbers of teacher retention and maybe inviting them as panels or learning from them, conducting internal research to say, what are the practices that these schools like a John Burroughs and Ward 5 that has very high teacher, like what are the practices that they're implementing that is allowing them to stay? Oh, by the way, we have this report that is telling us the problem. That's one thing. Two, I just wonder, and this is general wondering, like what role board members can play in our respective wards. I just continue to feel as though board members can do more in our wards in terms of programming, even in this virtual setting, whether that's a Zoom call with neighbors to talk about the issue, or maybe it's a Zoom call with schools in your ward that have high teacher retention to kind of get to like what is happening there and what are the causes. And then the last thing I would just say, another opportunity to really highlight this report could be like announcing further research, kind of dovetailing to what Emily was proposing with the Latinx teacher resolution, but also AFM teacher retention, to say we want to investigate ways in which we can support or promote retaining teachers of color, because research tells us their benefit on students of color. By the way, we did this report and now we're launching the phase 2, which is another way to kind of get a soft relaunch of the report. I think like all that to say, in my opinion, it's better to frame it in a more positive way and to relaunch by announcing further work versus just saying, look at the report that we released 2 months ago.
Great. That's great, Zach. And let me just throw in a couple of things as far as further information. I think that it's imperative that we advocate for professional development for new teachers. And when I told you 1 year through 5 year teachers from the systems, so that they know that we're watching, almost not negatively, but that we want to advocate through all of all the members. And I want to just add something. I talked to John Paul last week about having a Zoom call or a WebEx call with the principals in my ward. And John Paul, I want you to speak to that for everybody, because we had talked about that earlier.
Sure. So what I had said, Fraser brought up this idea, and I said, well, we can use the state board's WebEx platform if that's something that's, useful for you to meet with principals directly. As far as I'm concerned, it sounds like a really good resource use of our state board resources to have a WebEx meeting that we know is secure, and that principals can have that opportunity to speak with state board members about what's going on. We're happy to quote unquote host those things through the state board. Members just need to let me know the day and time you want to do it, and I'll make sure that it's set up and ready.
Thank you so much. I just wanted y'all to hear that because I was going to get in touch with everybody, but now we've got at least almost half of the board here on this call. So get to work, Zach. And the other thing too is I would like to do a follow-up survey. I see you, Ruth. I would like to do a follow-up survey, but it doesn't have to be. What I would like to do is have the schools come back to us with just the numbers of teachers that left, and try to frame that positively. But we would like to find out what the differences are. I know that's going to be difficult. We'll get a lot of feedback, negative feedback from the systems and things like that. But I think that's something to think about. If we can establish relationships, I think I've got pretty good relationships with the principals in my ward. And if we could just, even just informal information about how many teachers left, they're going to know in August how many teachers have left. They're hiring now. I know y'all, that's happening in your ward. I know it is in mine. They're hiring teachers now, so they must be hiring teachers for teachers that have left. So that's just something to think about. But the professional development is something I'd like to. I'll start working on that. But I think that's important. You know my story. You know, if I wasn't developed by that first teacher, I wouldn't have made it through the first 2 weeks of school. And new teachers need help, and we need to get with the principals union and the teachers union to have them advocate for professional development too. We need all hands on deck for that.
I think that also, Fraser, can be connected directly to this period because the PD has to be specific to this time at this point. And I have heard that from some school leaders that they are wondering if they're going to get more robust distance learning PD and or money to get it themselves. So I think that's something I think as much as possible, you know, as much as we can connect this issue to specifics of what's happening right now, the better as well.
John Paul, was our business meeting, our public meeting, was that on the cable? I didn't look. Was it on the cable channel?
So we live streamed it to YouTube, and then sent the MP4 file to the Office of Cable Television for them to broadcast on the cable television. We don't have a way to directly broadcast from WebEx to that, but it's on there within 24, 48 hours.
So it has been on there.
They have the MP4. I'm not sure if I haven't been watching the DKN 24 hours.
No, I haven't either.
But it's my understanding that it is on there, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Ruth, I think I saw you raise your hand, but that was a couple of minutes ago.
I still remember what I wanted to say.
I'm sorry?
No, I still know what I want to say. Am I on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I want to push back a little bit on the positivity, negativity thing, but getting to something that I think is responsive, which is we all want to be positive. I want to be positive. I will tell you, positive or not positive, DCPS doesn't want to work with us. I just want to say that. And the media is not interested in the positivity. They are not. The one place that we have gotten traction on this issue is that there is a huge problem. The media writes about problems. This is a huge problem. It is a huge problem for our kids. It is a huge problem. The retention issue is especially huge with African American teachers. The recruitment issue is especially huge with Latinx teachers. This is a huge issue all the way around. It deserves to be in the press. And I don't think we should be sheepish about talking about it as a problem that needs to be solved. And only when it's said that way is it going to get into the press. That said, I also agree, and I know Fraser has been pushing this all the time. We can connect that with solutions. And I think the original resolution talked about mentorship, if I'm remembering. So here's a thought, is that for next public meeting, in other words, bring it up tomorrow, and then for the May meeting, we have a resolution that follows up on what we had, that sort of recommits to some of those. That was a very basic resolution. That was really just, we're adopting this report. But that we do a resolution that is about teacher retention, that talks about what we found, that talks about the issues, acknowledges it as a serious problem in these various ways, and then is very clear about here's 3 or 4 things that we hope will happen and happen now, especially as we move into this next period. So it both gives us a way to refresh the report. It's a way of moving forward positively. So I'll say that. And I want to say one other thing that is relevant to this general thing is at the May public meeting, one of the speakers is Robert Simmons, who Zach also knows, and he now runs, I think, the Urban Teacher Center. And I talked to him a little bit about sort of what he's going to be talking about when he talks about the STAR framework and issues. And part of what he wants to talk about is the extraordinary pressure and morale disheartening effects of the star rating on schools with mainly Black students, mainly Black teachers, mainly Black leaders, and that that's a huge problem, and that in refining and reforming and modifying the star framework, that needs to be high in our minds. So that will come up.
Good. I think that I don't think you were being negative at all. I think at all, because I think that, and I don't think I've ever been called sheepish before in my life, but
that was for Zach. That was for Zach.
Yeah, he's real sheepish. But the thing is we need to make sure that we keep this. I'm not trying to hide the report or anything like that. I agree, but I think that's a great idea, Ruth, for the public meeting to have those solutions that we like, such as enhancing professional development and doing everything to retain, to talk about retention. I don't think we need to talk about attrition anymore. I think it all should be retention focused. Retention doesn't mean, like, I don't, if we've got to establish a relationship with DCPS, right? And there are people in DCPS that agree with us, right? And we need to make sure that it's going to be hard. It's hard work, right? But so what? It's hard work. We can do it. We're getting paid big bucks. We just got paid yesterday.
I would just add that we could potentially, in that framing, anchor it around recruitment and retention, to Frasia's point.
No, that works. Yeah.
And I just want to make sure I understand you, that you're talking about changing the words to retention, which I'm for, but not to avoid acknowledging the data in our report.
Not to acknowledge what?
No, when you say to frame as retention, not attrition, I assume you're saying use the word retention, not attrition. I hope you're not saying let's avoid talking about the data in the report.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm just saying that we know what the attrition is.
Okay, that's fine.
Right.
But we're focusing on solutions.
My push would be like, there's two ways of looking at it. You can name the problem, and I think we've already named the problem. It's not about being sheepish. It's sheepish as much as it's about wanting to be solutions oriented. And I think there's a way to say, we have a problem, here's the data, and here is our approach to the solution.
Right.
I think that's totally right. I
agree completely.
We have a problem, here it is, here's our solutions.
Does anybody else have anything? Because that sort of exhausts my list here.
I guess I'm wondering about council, and should we be communicating directly with our council members about this, sending them the report, talking to them about it, framing it in terms of, the COVID crisis and why it matters now, and having a specific ask. That's
Did Malayo, was it sent to the council?
It was suggested to be sent to the council, but I wanted us to have this meeting first to see if we would still be pushing it.
I think it should be.
Yes.
Okay.
So what I would suggest, going back to a previous conversation that I had with John Paul and I think Malayo, is that we should have, from the board, there should be a list of people that get this, including everybody on the council, including, as I said, the deans, and everybody should contribute to that list. It should go out broadly. I also think it would be great to recommend that every board member send it to their own council person and to whatever at-large council members they're close to, or council staff. That's how this is going to get out. You know how we are. I don't necessarily recognize or hear or see the first time I get hit with something, but the sixth time I'm like, oh man, that's an issue. Yeah, I read about that. So I don't think, I think the board should send it out because that's our job, and members should totally send it out. And as part of our coordinated effort to get more board involvement, I think we should specifically have an ask list of our members, one of which is, please take this, send it with a cover memo to your council member and, other key people.
And so can I just ask, does it make sense to have the cover letter include sort of the Latino teacher recruitment and retention resolution as part of the larger issue, and sort of as Zach pointed out, a line about our continued work in the area of, diversifying our teacher pool, to make this sort of part of our effort to create stability and also make sure that students have teachers, who they can speak to in their language and also who they see themselves in, right? So it's sort of broadening the message a little bit. I don't know if that feels too awkward or too much, but I do want to put it out there. Like, I'm trying to figure out what are the next steps for the resolution as well. As I said, there is a lot of interest in the advocacy community and among Latino teachers. And so I want to be able to explain to them what we're doing on the board with the resolution.
I mean, what my response to that is, first of all, you should definitely feel like you can connect them in your own voice. Secondly, my own preference is the board should not wait. The board needs to get this report out to all of these people, and it needs to do it now, just now and I don't think it needs to connect. I think it needs to say, this is a report on attrition, blah, blah, blah. That just needs to go out.
But it's already been out now.
It's not, Fraser, it has not gone out to the council. It has not gone out to principals. It has not, it's gone out to a very small list. We need to get it out to a very big list.
Okay.
My judgment is we should do that quickly, and we should do it now. I also think 3 weeks from now, we're going to have a public meeting. We should do this resolution that we talked about that connects it more explicitly to the Latinx. And I think,
I think that's a great idea. That'll do what you're talking about, Emily.
So wait, I just want to make sure I understand, Ruth, what you're proposing is at, say, the June public meeting, we would maybe May public meeting?
Yeah.
We vote on having a broader resolution around teacher diversity. Is that what you're saying?
Teacher retention.
Yeah, retention. I would say retention and yeah, and I guess, and you're right, that part of it is, yes, you're right. The retention speaks more to the African American, and to get to Latinx, it also has to be about.
So procedurally, we would need that resolution by last Friday.
So that's why I was saying June is probably more realistic, right?
Right.
But my understanding, John Paul, is if we brought something up at the Wednesday meeting, it could go to the next meeting. I didn't know that it had to be in paper that was there the Friday before.
Well, the resolution would need to be discussed at the working session. It doesn't, it's not just like an idea. You have to.
No, I know. So a resolution, right. So a resolution could come tomorrow night.
Yes. So if a resolution can come up at new business tomorrow and the text is ready for tomorrow, then yeah, absolutely, we could do it in May.
Or maybe wait till June. We got so much going on. So I'm not opposed to waiting until June. But I do think we need to make a big push to get the report out now, and then maybe have a June resolution with a new push.
Just 2 recommendations, or with a question. So Ruth, what is your hope of, what are you wanting to happen by sending out the report, let's say now, to the council and all of these other stakeholders?
Because we invested a huge amount of time and.
Not why, but like what are you hoping will.
What's the outcome?
To raise the valence of the issue. To raise the valence of the issue so that people understand it's an issue, to connect us to it. It is what people positively connect the board to as an issue more than anything else. So it sort of continues.
So yeah, I'm not hearing like a result from that. And my push would be actually to wait until we have a resolution where we're making recommendations to those stakeholders to say, here's our report, and here are the 3 or 4 things, whether they
Zach, we can send them a second letter.
I just don't think that's effective to like
So
send a
most
report.
people know that I really have to disagree. I mean, the idea that we have this report and we haven't sent it out to the county. I mean, I don't, this is not the place to argue that, but I really think that's.
All right, well, I tell you, the place to argue.
One second. In the grand scheme of things, we're talking what, like 3 weeks, which I know sounds like a long time, but it's not really that long of a time. And I think to get board input and put together a comprehensive list of recommendations that the council and others can act on will be much more effective than just delivering a report that people more than likely are not going to read. They very well might likely read our resolution or memo that's attached to it.
I think that this is something, Ruth, I think this is something we can talk about tomorrow.
You know, if we decide that we have to go to a state board meeting every time we want to send out a report, we are screwed, people. I just want to say that. I really think this is, and it's not exact. We're talking about June. I'm done. That's all I have to say.
The meeting is tomorrow, Ruth.
I know, Fraser, the meeting is tomorrow. I'm saying the decision to send out a report that we did to a list of people does not require going to a working meeting. And if we say that, we will do very little. That's
It's not, just to be clear, my recommendation is not postponing to get buy-in, but it's more so to say, what do we want to come out of this? And I think I would venture to guess you would want the council to take action on this. And so even if it were tomorrow, Fraser, if you were to elevate this to say, what are some ideas that people could put on the table? I could see a world where maybe we have something put together by the May public meeting where we can attach it to the report to say, here are our recommendations.
I agree completely.
I mean, again, I think it's the orientation of naming the problem versus naming solutions. And I think we should be in the mindset of naming a solution.
But Ruth, are you saying that, so maybe it's a yes and here where we send it out to, you know, various folks, not necessarily to our council members yet, but to, as Ruth was saying, like policy folks and the press, so that it has visibility. And
but it's already been sent to the press.
It's been sent to the press, but did they pick it up?
And I sent it out and 1,500 people read it.
I know that Zach did a great job. Yay, Zach. And it's in my next newsletter if I ever get it out. What Zach did was great.
Are you talking about the 186-page report or the video?
Both. He sent them both out, and it was really well put in his. So
I mean, Ruth, I'm not trying to raise your blood pressure, but is it possible to bring or make space on the agenda tomorrow to put solution recommendations for a memo?
Yeah, no, let me be clear. I'm for doing that.
And do you think a 2-week delay between tomorrow and the public meeting will make that drastic of a difference in getting the report out?
I think that, let me say it in 2 different ways. I thought we had just agreed on June. The reason for June, I will say, we have a very packed May meeting. We've sort of shoved, so it's a very packed meeting. So I think it would actually be better to do it in June. So that's one, and then it's more than 3 weeks. And yes, Zach, I think it is too long. I think we have a report. It needs to go out with a cover letter that says we have this report, it's important, and you should know about it. And we should follow up on it with the resolution and send it out again. Absolutely. I do not see a problem with sending it out, and we can have we can say something general about what we want about it, which we already do. We talk about, we want to have, I think in what we sent out, it talks about more mentorships, and it talks about the importance of the council having, doing an annual report. It's not solution oriented. So we should do more solutions. I agree. But I do not believe that should hold up getting it out, or frankly, doing another, to do a real push to get our members and advocates and so on to push this out on social media.
Well, how long does it take to put together a package like we did for the homeless resolution that goes to council with recommendations in a cover letter.
The hearing was in December and the letter went out in April. Now, it doesn't always take that long, but everything can't be perfect.
Yes.
That's
I'm not, I must be missing something because it seems to me that, we're talking about maybe 4 bullet points that are recommendations for solutions. And B, we can talk about it tomorrow and get input tomorrow and ask people to think about it and give us input by next Monday. And we can put it as a resolution at the May meeting. And I understand what you're saying about a stacked meeting, Ruth, but just give me 5 minutes and we can unstack that.
So I have 2 questions, and I apologize for breaking in. I think there's 2 things that I want to check with. So one, you mentioned wanting to have a cover letter for the report to go to council and LEAs. Do you want Fraser and the staff to draft and send it out to everybody? Do you want to draft that? I just want to make sure on the assignments.
We talked about this 2 weeks ago. It's a 2-paragraph cover letter that says, here is our report. Here's what, it should have 3 bullet points about what's in it and 2 bullet points about what we asked for. It's not hard.
And then the second piece that I want to talk about is if we are able to do this for the May meeting, it might help in terms of requesting things that might require budget, because the budget will be considered prior to then our June meeting.
Yes.
So
I'm not going to say it again. I think we should send out the report, and I think we should follow up on it in different ways with the resolution, with budget. They're not mutually incompatible, and that's all. And I'm not just talking about the sending out to all the people. I also think there should be a coordinated effort to sort of have a day, to name a day where we get all board members and our advocates to sort of push this out. As I acknowledge my failure on this, as I did not and others did not when it first came out, which I regret. And I think it was a missed opportunity for us. And I'd like for us to do it again, to sort of get it out, to connect it to the COVID, that stability really matters. Here's our report. And then whether it's 3 weeks later or 6 weeks later, we have the resolution that adds some new context to it. But if we stack everything together, it takes forever and it's too much to hear. The messaging is, first there's a report, then there's a set of solutions, that's how I would see it.
But if you're talking about doing that, if we're just talking about doing the put out of it, then you want all the members of the board to get together names and email addresses to be sent, for them to be sent to educational professionals and blah, 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 advocates and all that, right? Are we going to ask for that?
Staff can put together a big list. Board members can add to it. A bunch can be done now, and you can add things in, and board members can send them out subsequently too.
Well, but that's not what you're asking for. You're asking for a big push, not some kind of scattershot. Board members can do it on their own kind of thing. That doesn't. I would think that if we're going to do this, we want to have that big one day everybody does it on the same day kind of thing. And so is that something we should ask tomorrow at the meeting from everyone? Ruth?
I think that would be great, Fraser. I don't want to hold up a mailing to 100 people while we wait for board members to come up with another 50. This is getting silly. So Why don't we do what you're saying, Fraser? Why don't we do that? Let's start tomorrow night to sort of create that list so that when we adopt this resolution in May or June, we're in a position to have that list ready. Does that make sense? Look, I mean, I feel like I don't want to keep saying this. I think we need to get this out. And we also need to get it out again. That's,
All right, well, I think that's where we are. If anybody else have anything to say? And the man used to say, my time is up. Thank you for yours. And we'll see you tomorrow night.
so look, I just want to say, I didn't want it. Oh, sorry.
Should we bring ideas tomorrow, or I'm just not clear on where we landed?
I'm gonna send an email to everyone.
Cool.
Can someone draft a resolution? I mean, it can be basic that can then be revised prior, but just sort of a basic resolution that would sort of follow up on the report and add the context that we talked about, the COVID context, takes the recommendations from the last resolution, but adds a few as well.
Malayo, can you do that?
Sure. I guess the staff will work on that. No problem.
Okay. All right, we'll see you all tomorrow.
Can I just say something? I'm sorry that this ended up with me just sort of weighing in. I am impatient to get something out. I'm not at all trying to, I just want to be clear. I think all the ideas for a next step are terrific. The ones from everybody that Fraser started with, that Emily raised, that Malayo talked about, that Zach, that everybody talked about, they're all terrific. I worry so much that we want to do something even better and it doesn't get out. And that's what I'm worried about.
What's the difference from you or Emily or Fraser sending to the council and these other people? Like, I'm not understanding why it needs to be some big master list from the state board versus Ruth.
Not a big deal, Zach. It's not a big deal. It just should get done.
But you're the president. Wouldn't it be just as significant if you sent an email to say?
I would send an email. I'll send the email.
I'm not challenging. I'm genuinely not understanding, because of what I'm hearing Fraser say is, would it make more sense for us?
You're into office management. This is not the place, okay?
Well, no, I think you have people that are disagreeing with you, and it seemed like the chair of the committee, Fraser, had a pretty solid point. And I guess I'm also trying to be sensitive to your critique of like time and waiting. And so I'm happy to split some of the responsibility with you. What if board members kind of shared the report to these stakeholders, and then from the official, I guess, state board account or John Paul or whatever that is, we waited until we had all of these ducks in a row with the resolutions and everything else? Would that kind of meet halfway?
I think we've gone far enough on this. Either the staff and the leadership are going to make choices about this, or we can bring it to the board. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a little.
I don't. It's not about the. I guess I don't understand the difference from the staff preparing something and sending it, and Ruth preparing something and sending it to 100 people this afternoon. I just don't see the difference in that.
I know. But this is really not the place to talk about it. Sorry. I mean, I'll talk to you offline. I'm not going to.
Well, Fraser, I will bring recommendations tomorrow in the event.
I'll send an email to everybody.
I'll make sure they're on paper just in case we don't have a lot of time to talk about it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye, Emily.
Thanks,
Bye, Ruth.
everyone.
Bye.
See you, Zach. Bye, Malayo. See you, John Paul. And Angela, see you.